Fans, we are live with another edition of the Great North Wrestling Podcast. My name is Jack Kilby, and we're very pleased tonight to have now the former Great North Wrestling Women's Champion, Nova, on the podcast tonight. How are you, Nova?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing?
Most excellent, and thank you for appearing. We wanted to have you on to get into the history of yourself in the business and looking forward into 2023, what your objectives are, and we'll get all into that. But I like to start off our interviews here with a question that I think the fans appreciate, and that is, what growing up. First of all, I shouldn't assume, but growing up, were you a fan of the professional wrestling business? And if you were, what promotion or performers made you a fan?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town in Northern Ontario called Dowling, Ontario. Probably 1,000 or less people at the time, but with population. So when it came to television, just basic cable. So all I really had to watch was what was available, which was the WWF, WWE. And so that's basically what I followed growing up. I loved the Attitude Era, as many others did, and I was a huge fan of the Hardy Boys. So I got fixated a lot on just their skill sets and their attitude and their moves and their openness. And then, not too long after that, I got into my Nintendo 64 and I got to start playing WCW Revenge, and I got addicted at the time.
What about you mentioned, and I did read that you're a fan of the Hardy Boys. What and I guess that would include Lita as well as part of that Team Extreme team. What about them caught your eye, so to speak? Was it the high flying, the high risk spots, or just the rock star sort of era or aura that they emanated?
I think it was their no care attitude. I loved having that trio. I loved Lita. She was just such a badass female for me. Extremely motivating. She's just strong. She's not she's not over sexualized. She's just really representing women extremely well in that sense. With regards to the Hardy Boys, I was more so drawn to Jeff. I just really loved the gymnastics behind what he did, and it's always something that I idolized and eventually wanted to bring into my own craft.
So looking back again on your early awareness of the sport and the Hardy Boys notwithstanding, were there any particular female wrestlers of the time? I think that was right around the time that there was still a women's championship, sort of pre-Diva. But were there any female wrestlers that you looked at that sort of motivated you to become involved on a worker level?
It was definitely Lita and Trish Stratus. Those two were a huge influence for me.
Excellent. So you were a standout athlete in your high school career in terms of volleyball and other sports. But what was, if you can, and I know this can be a difficult question to answer, but if you could boil it down or delineate to a single factor, notwithstanding your natural athleticism, what was that moment that you decided, you know what, I want to pursue this as a career?
So after in high school, I played every sport there was. I excelled in every sport there was. I was captain of every team. I got athlete of the year, and then I went into college. In college, I was a volleyball player as well, where I competed. And then after college, once I graduated college, I was playing in a lot of co-ed and women's cash tournaments with all ex-college and university players. Eventually received an invite to go play professionally in Slovenia. I never ended up going just because my shoot job did not allow the leave of absence. But then I kind of came to a point in, I say like literally December of 2018, I reached a point where I was just reminiscing and thinking to myself, okay, I'm in the best shape of my life. I'm still extremely athletic. I'm strong. I've got great cardio, and I still want to show for it, but for what? And like, literally at that point, WWE Raw just kind of popped on TV, and I never really gave it a second thought up until December of 2018 because I'm in a small town. I have no access to a ring. You know, the closest ring is hours away, but I don't know what happened at that point. But I just had this moment where I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm not getting any younger. You know, tomorrow is never promised. I may never see tomorrow. So why not just give it a shot? So at that time, like literally in my fuck it moment, I started Google searching local wrestling promotions and just a way to get myself into a ring, just to run the ropes and see if I'm even any good at it. And it kind of just all started from there. I ended up speaking to Rock Solid Wrestling, and I ended up having a sit down meeting interview with Tornado, Mark Bartolucci, at a local Starbucks in Sudbury, Ontario. And at that point, I knew nothing about indie wrestling. Like, because I'm from a small town and I had cable, all I knew was what was on TV. So I had no idea about indie wrestling. He was trying to explain it to me, but I didn't really know what he was talking about because I never saw it firsthand. But he was like, listen, like, we can try and train you, but I just remember one thing he said to me was, you may not like it. A lot of women don't like it. As soon as they, get accidentally popped in the face and get struck in the face or something like that, and they get hurt, they're out. You know what I mean? So he's like, we'll give it a shot, and we'll see how you are and how you take to the training, and then we'll go from there. And then the rest is history.
So you mentioned that you trained under Tornado. What, given in addition to describing your training experience and the ups and downs of that, or whatever that entailed in the modern era, given the fact that you're a very well conditioned athlete and accomplished athlete, did it surprise you going into the training how taxing it was?
Yes, how I commenced in my wrestling career is actually quite interesting. So because in Sudbury, Ontario, so I lived in Sudbury, Ontario at the time when I kind of started connecting with Tornado. He lived in Sudbury, Ontario, but there was no ring there. There was no training facility there. So how we began training was he started to show me chain wrestling in the basement of his home. So once or twice a week, outside of my shoot job in the evenings, I go to his house, we go into his house, see his family, and then go downstairs and ready for training. And he was teaching me chain wrestling in the basement. We eventually transitioned to, simple suplexes and stuff. He just dragged out a mattress in the living room of his, his basement. And we were doing suplexes, trying, to not hit the television and stuff like that. And yeah, so even just learning chain wrestling, again, not something that I even knew existed because all I saw was what was on cable growing up. So what I was learning was extremely mentally challenging, mentally stimulating, a lot of memory and repetition involved. I had no idea what I was getting into, but I love a challenge and I don't like being comfortable. So I just kept going at
it. In terms of, you sort of touched on it earlier in terms of the first time a competitor would experience, say, a potato or a stiff shot or whatnot. What was that like for you when you were able to transition to an actual ring and start bumping? Was that something where you took a second and thought, what am I getting myself into?
Yeah, the feeling that your body and your neck gets after training or after a match, it's something I've never really experienced before. You can run a Spartan race, you can work out in the gym and have sore muscles, but in the first year of my pro wrestling career, especially because the level I was training when I went to like Tyson Duke's Wrestling Factory, the level of training we were receiving, like, I wasn't giving my body a break because it was train, match. And I just remember, after a night of training or a night of a match, waking up in the morning every single time and feeling like I was struck by a truck. And That was in the first, year or two of my career. It's just something you'll never be able to experience unless you get into a ring and you actually wrestle.
Yeah, 100%. It's one thing to be have great cardio and be a weightlifter or whatever, but yeah, after taking bumps myself, there you just have to experience it. So you trained under Tyson. You mentioned him, quite a well respected, accomplished indie legend in Canada, in this province especially. What part of that training augmented what you had already learned?
So something did come before that. So once I was done kind of like in Tornado's basement, we needed something more. Tornado did have connections to Crossbody Pro Wrestling Academy, because I believe Tornado was utilizing their ring for all of the Rock Solid Wrestling events. So when I did transition into a ring, it was firstly at Crossbody, just for I think the summer of 2019. And then I did eventually transition into Tyson Duke's Wrestling Factory, because I was living in Sudbury, Ontario, and I was traveling hours upon hours one way just for training at Crossbody and then driving home, and then not really returning to that training in the ring maybe a week or two after. So as much as I would train in the ring, learn amazingly there, do extremely well, you go home, and then if you're not getting the reps in, you're not, it's like for your mind, right? You're not retaining all of that material once you go home, because then you don't touch a ring for another week or two. So I knew that at that point I needed to enroll in like a nightly class, just like the other students are. They don't know how lucky they are that they live locally where a ring is. So with my shoot job, I ended up putting in for I needed to do annual leave for, I believe it was 2020. And at the beginning of 2020, in January that month, like I took all of my annual leave in one shot, and I moved out to London, Ontario. I rented a bedroom out of somebody's house that I, connected off Kijiji. And I went to Tyson Duke's Wrestling Factory for that full month. And that's eventually where I started to like really get better with my wrestling, to be able to eventually commence my first match.
We'll talk about this in a bit, but you are, from what I've seen, a strong promo. Especially, unfortunately, so few people saw the Great North Wrestling event in Kingston last year, but you were able to cut a number of promos there. Was that something that you really had to work on, or did you find that came, I don't want to say as easily as the physicality, but along those lines, and what help did you have from your trainers in that regard?
So starting anything new for the first time, you're likely not going to be good at it. And it takes reps, takes lots of reps. And that's how I personally learn, is hands-on, reps, 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 just for my mental retention. So no, promos are not a forte of mine by any means. And I'm only getting better at them with practice. So even though maybe, on video it looks like I nailed it, it probably took a crap ton of takes before I was able to actually nail it. So at the beginning of my wrestling career, I'd say like back in 2019, Tyson Dukes did guide me through promos. And, he even gave me shit about like maybe some of the clothing I was wearing, because they would have a logo on it. And he's like, you can't wear Nike during your promo, you know what I mean? So like, it's just the little things that you don't know unless you're told. So I was learning as I go. So my promos it's not my forte. Athletics is my forte. So I find that in the ring comes a lot easier for me than promos, but I'm getting better as I do more.
Absolutely. So the name Nova, that jumped out at me when I first heard about you, given the ECW male wrestler, the same name, and I thought it was a really interesting choice. How did you land on that name Nova for your character?
In 2019, when I was starting to get my feet wet in indie wrestling, I was actually, for a very short period of time, a manager for Tornado. I was a heel, I was a China-esque look, and my manager name was Andy Stacks, the atomic Andy Stacks. When it was time to transition into pro wrestling myself after being trained by Tyson Dukes, he did not like that name. We canvassed a ton of names to utilize, and I was kind of rushed to do it just because after my training with him for that 1 month, he wanted to throw me in pro wrestling matches right away. So I felt like I was quite short for time. And I passed by a lot of names to him, which he just didn't like or approve of. And then I just remember there was one final time where he's like, you know what? He's like, you need to think of a name that's feminine and strong and just a one namer, like not a first and last name, just one name, feminine and strong. And I eventually canvassed a bunch of other names. Supernova was kind of like, well, because it's kind of like an attachment of Atomic, which was my manager name. And so Supernova is kind of like how I began in the whole wrestling industry. I just kind of like popped out of nowhere, like an exploding star. So I asked him, I'm like, Nova, I find it's feminine and strong. And but I'm like, I also know that this was utilized in the past, and I don't want to step on anyone's toes. But what do you think, Tyson? Because I find that he's more of a vet and he has more say behind something like that. He loved it, and he said it wouldn't be a problem. So I was like, all right, we're gonna go with that, and that's how I debuted as Nova.
Excellent. So when you were developing your character, did you and we know whatever show you're working on, spot shows, whatnot, you go with the flow in terms of what the promoter has in mind for you. But did you feel an affinity one way or another towards working face or working heel? And if so, why?
Yeah, I just want to be myself, and I find that being myself makes everything easier. I enjoy being face because I feel like as an adult female in the pro wrestling industry, I want to be a good role model for the children and the youth growing up. In my encounters with the youth and the fans, they do kind of look up to me like I'm a superhero. So I do feel like I have that responsibility to be just a positive role model for them, and show them that, especially the little girls, like you can be anything you want to be growing up. So I think being a face kind of just came more naturally to me that way.
So we'll get into the women's revolution in a bit, but did you feel any sort of as a female still in a largely male dominated profession, did you feel any extra pressure, or uh, did you feel that you had to work that much harder than the males that you were training with to succeed?
Yes and no. A lot of the male students that I was training with, like I do find myself to be really a lot larger than a lot of the younger, because a lot of the students in pro wrestling are still younger than me. I'm 34 years old, so they're and it's great for them because they're starting young. But I do find that despite there being males to train with, I was a lot larger and more built than a lot of them, so it wasn't too much of an issue for me in that regard. But when I did train with some experienced male wrestlers, it is challenging. You do find you're a bit under a microscope that way. You feel like you have something to prove. But I loved being able to challenge myself and utilize my strengths against them, and just see how well I hold up. It's a good challenge.
So you're speaking of in terms of intergender wrestling.
Correct. Intergender wrestling, even training in the ring, just being
Gotcha.
around the male talent in the backstage area.
In terms of your actual debut, in the ring in a first match with a house and fans. What walk us through that process of someone who's got all the tools, but then when it comes to showtime, there's that saying, and then the bell rings in this business. Did you was that something that you were overcome with in terms of nervousness, or when you finally got to that stage where you can showcase what you bring, was that something that it was like a duck to water, so to speak?
Oh yeah, because you don't know what it's like until you experience it for the first time. And at that point, I didn't experience any of it. You know, the most people I wrestled in front of was a couple students who were watching me, you know, in practice matches at Tyson Duke's Wrestling Factory on a regular training night. So that would be the most people I'd wrestle for until that time in March of 2019. I was at Fanshawe College with Smash Wrestling, and yeah, until the bell rings, exactly what you said. I don't know what I was going to see until I walked out there, and there was a lot of people there watching me. It was extremely nerve wracking, but you just got to focus on your opponent and putting on the best damn match you can and entertain them.
And so for your first series of matches, were you focused on? I know this is a matter of debate amongst workers in terms of going over every spot in the match, et cetera, or was it um, you were interested in going out there and putting it together, calling it in the ring, so to speak, and getting the character over? How did that work for you? That fascinates me because it's so many conflicting priorities at once to make the match good and entertaining. Were you worried about blowing spots, not getting over with the crowd, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I'm a natural overthinker, so that's always a challenge for me. And so on my debut match, I was definitely just focused on my opponent, not paying attention to anybody around me. It's different now. I'm able to, you know, relax a bit more because of all the reps that I've done. And I can actually, you know, I could, you know, I have in mind the fans, what they're saying, I can react to them and etc. But, you know, your first debut match, everyone's around, just all eyes are on you, and I'm just trying to focus on my match with my opponent.
And were you satisfied with your first few matches, or were you over critical of yourself? What did you learn from that to take moving forward?
Always overcritical of myself, but at the same time, and I think very positively, is, you know, if I didn't enjoy it, if I didn't care, then I wouldn't be so hard on myself. Yeah.
In I read it was 2019. You received a tryout with the World Wrestling Entertainment Organization, and I guess you went down to the Performance Center. Got a couple of questions there. How Number one, how did that come about? And walk us through what that looks like from the time you show up till the time you leave, because fans hear a lot about the Performance Center, and it seems to be one of the areas of the business that people talk about a lot, but really don't know from the inside. And if you could go into that, fans would love it, I'm sure.
Yeah, so a big reason as well why my name is Nova is because of being a supernova, the exploding stars. So after I debuted my first match in March of 2019, 2 weeks later, I was basically flown out to the Performance Center in Orlando, Florida. And that was just by way of, and this is accessible to anybody, going on the website and filling out the form, the application form. So that's what I did. So I got an email, I got the call, they were interested, because I've had, you know, you gotta fill out the form just like everybody else, submit your promo photos, whatever experience you had, which was for me was zero. But yeah, and then I ended up going in, I think it was like early April, mid-April, for the Performance Center. It if I had to relate it to something, it was very militant and almost like a boot camp. It was very physically demanding. I just remember packing a lot of food, packing a lot of carbohydrate powders and BCAAs, making sure that I'm well hydrated, because especially being in Northern Ontario, we're not used to having to work out in the heat that's in Orlando, Florida. So just really had to prepare myself that way, make sure that I was fueled properly. And it was from morning till evening, it was just all physical.
Was there a guest trainer there who put you through your paces of note, or who was in charge of that aspect of it? And I'll ask another question with respect to promo class, but that at the start, please.
The person in charge was William Regal. And I guess the person under him that was so William Regal wasn't there all the time, but he was in charge, and the person under him was Prince Albert. And they had a lot of the NXT talent that were currently signed assist with the tryout, just documentation on their clipboards and stuff like that, because there's multiple rings where there's multiple candidates doing things at one time. So the NXT talent would be assigned to each ring and assist that in that sense. Yeah.
Did you get to participate in the vaunted, almost legendary promo class that Dusty Rhodes started at the time when you were down there?
It wasn't a promo class, but we were advised ahead of time that during the tryouts, they're going to want you to do a promo. So it wasn't a class, but we came prepared. So, a week or two before I even knew that I was being flown out, I started preparing my promo and had it ready to go for once I was in Orlando, Florida. So it was just kind of like a one-shot deal type of thing when it was there.
So was that a single?
Sorry, you lost your mic. I can't hear you.
Sorry, we're back. We're having some technical difficulties. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to know, was it a single full day or a series of days that you were at the PC?
I was there for a week.
Wow. Was it all in-ring work every day, or a variance of that?
It was, I would say, 90% in-ring work, and then the other 10%, we were doing a couple fitness things outside of the performance center in the parking lot, but that was more so for warm-ups and stuff like that.
So at the end of the process, what was it that they said to you? Did they say we'll give you some notes or whatnot, or areas that you need to focus on before coming back, or did they, in your opinion, leave the door open for future tryouts, etc.?
So once you're done your tryouts, you literally leave and travel home, and they basically say we'll be in contact. And so everyone's waiting for that email, hoping that they get the chance to go back and get the job. When I was there for tryouts, I was in a bit of a different mindset, just because I literally had 2 weeks of being in pro wrestling matches before that. So I actually didn't really have high hopes that I would get it. But I did go there mentally saying to myself, I'm going to give it everything I can. And if they like me, they'll take me. So once I returned to Sudbury, Ontario, I did receive an email from them. So that was their means of reply post tryouts. But the email I did receive did appear to be more so a default email that they would have, copied and pasted to the candidates who are not successful. And they don't give you custom feedback based off of your individual tryout. It was more like a thank you for coming, thank you for participating. Um, from here, you know, unfortunately, you will not be, you know, moving to the next stage. However, just, you know, keep doing what you're doing, and just so you know, you're still on our radar. That's kind of basically what the email was like.
So, do you touch base with them periodically, or are you going to wait for you to have more experience under your belt before you approach them again? I'm assuming that's your ultimate career goal, correct?
Unfortunately, not.
Oh wow.
No, so we weren't going to discuss this, but I'll slightly touch on it. I am at a point in my life where I am 13 years of service in policing, and that is my priority. It's my pension, and I'm 34 years old. I'm not in my early 20s anymore. There's a lot of upcoming talent who are working their asses off to get that shot, and I respect that. I'm utilizing. So in 2019, I did think about potentially going out and, you know, if I got the job, you know, possibly resigning and then doing WWE full time. But I believe I'm now in a position where I'm extremely content where I am in life, and I feel like a work-life balance is very important. So the life portion is actually performing in and wrestling in matches, and entertaining the fans, which brings me great joy. So yeah, I don't feel like at this point I will be in contact with WWE again. Things could change, my mind can change, you know, I don't know, but at this point I'm very content where I am in life.
Excellent. I certainly understand that and respect that. In February 2020, correct me if I'm wrong, but you captured your first title. And then thereafter, at a card that we put on in Kingston, you captured the Great North Wrestling Women's title in quite an exciting encounter. What what did you feel validation in terms of your efforts for, you know, receiving the push of those companies so early in your career? And was it extra gratifying, or was it something that you felt that you were prepared for to carry the banner for the women's title?
Firstly, childhood dream come true. It was amazing, an amazing feeling. I cried when I got the titles. I did feel that, you know, I was still quite early in my career where my confidence levels weren't entirely there having titles, because I'm not a veteran. I'm brand new. However, at the same time, I busted my ass for that, because there was a long period of time in my wrestling training where I was driving 6 hours one way to London, Ontario, and training with Tyson on a Saturday for a couple hours, and then driving 6 hours back. And I did that almost every weekend for 6 months. So it was exhausting, a lot of gas money, a lot of car mileage, and I busted my ass off for it. So when I actually did, you know, win those championship titles, it was extremely validating and so rewarding. You know, I put in the work. I did put in the work.
Excellent. And given the fact that the Great North Wrestling Company, our company, is restarting in 2023 and basically starting from scratch again, you were stripped administratively of the women's title, a title you never lost, you never submitted. And I don't know if you were able to catch Jessica Black, who appeared a few weeks ago on this program, where she talked about the fact that the card in Kingston where you won the title or defended the title, that should have been her spot. She's a former Great North Wrestling Women's Champion, and she feels that she was probably overlooked in that respect, and is looking forward to facing you in the future. Do you have any comments to that? That
How
you
can
didn't?
you blame her? I mean, I look at both sides of it, and if I'm sitting in her shoes, I actually totally understand. She's you know, she's a veteran, she's well respected, and she's put in her time. So the fact that she didn't get that shot, I totally get it. And yeah, I totally validate her feelings behind it. but all we, you can't stay sour about it. All you can do is move forward. So let's do this.
It's definitely a match that the Great North Wrestling fans are talking about and want to see coming up. And as Hannibal mentioned on this channel yesterday, we're on the precipice of a major announcement for the first Great North Wrestling card of 2023. So fans, stay tuned for that, and we're definitely going to have a barn burner of a match with Nova involved. In terms of the larger so-called women's revolution, evolution, etc., the pay-per-view that occurred, that was, female talent in its entirety, that seemed to be a high point in terms of positioning on the card and moving from something that was, an attraction to, women can be in the main event, can draw, can create buzz. Since that time, some of the commentators in the business have stated, it's really kind of lost some steam, if you will, and there's not a lot of there's not the same buzz that there was, especially about the WWE division, and AEW women's division has its critics, etc. But what are your thoughts on the state of women's wrestling now and moving forward into the future?
I find that it's all about visibility. So if it's losing steam, it's because they're not doing it as much anymore, or they're not showing for it as much. So again, it's all about visibility and putting on the matches. So when it comes to on television, I'm still seeing that like women's wrestling is doing amazing. There's so much talent there. Indie wrestling wise, not so good. I think it's the talent pool in Ontario. There's just not a lot of female wrestlers to actually have in a card. But at the same time, an indie show, you're only going to have one women's match. Again, it's because of the lack of numbers that we have in Ontario for female wrestlers. But I think that, we can get more steam if maybe we tried to put on maybe a second women's match in the same show. The men are still outnumbering the women.
Absolutely. In terms of your favorite, or sorry, your favorite opponent to date, that's part A of the question. Who would that be? And secondly, if you had a dream opponent in terms of active wrestlers in this current time frame, who would those individuals be?
So right now, I am loving Britt Baker, and I feel like it's because I can relate myself a little bit to her in a sense where she's a career woman and she's also wrestling. So, she actually is a dentist and she worked her ass off to get that profession. And so I kind of see myself in that same sense and she's still kicking ass in the ring. I respect her so much. And, now she's doing all these gory matches and she's putting her body through hell, just to show that us women, we can do it too. And she's freaking beautiful still. And some women's wrestlers who I would eventually like to face or would dream to face. One of them would take people by surprise, but Ronda Rousey. More so because I did watch her upon her commencement in UFC, and I followed her career through that. I idolize her. I find that she's a strong, badass female, and I've always looked up to her. She helps me be more fierce and gain that confidence when it comes to having to be in the ring. So I think it's really cool that she did give wrestling a shot. And then Sonya Deville would be actually pretty cool to face as well. Much like her, we're both part of the LGBT community. So, it's amazing to be able to see that she can, promo that and still be as successful as she is in the industry.
Is it difficult for yourself having an established career that's a priority for you in the criminal justice field, and and managing an independent wrestling career. Does that take a lot of doing, and do you get flexibility from your employer to make bookings when they come up? Because I'm assuming some bookings are you get more notice than others, that sort of thing.
That's right. So I am a shift worker, and I am a lot of days off. So my shifts are 4 on, 4 off, and that means that I don't always have weekends off. Weekends are wrestling shows, so unfortunately, not always available for the wrestling shows that I want. I do have a lot of accumulated time where I could put in that request to get a wrestling, to get that time off to maybe work the match. But there is a lot of last minute, matches or shows that promoters do reach out to me, and unfortunately, I have to deny. And but being able to be allotted that time to take off for a show, it depends on whether there's boots on the ground, basically. In policing in Ontario right now, there is a massive shortage for boots on the ground. So we're hurting in that sense. So unless I'm asking weeks or months in advance for that time off, chances are I'm not going to get it.
Gotcha. So I guess our last question is, what is next for Nova in terms of the wrestling business?
So there is a plan in place for Nova. We have some ideas. I can't spoil it at this time, but I can tell you that Nova will be challenging her character in a different sense, and you'll just have to wait and see. I would say in the next upcoming months, you'll see something new from Nova.
That's exciting. Where can the fans find you on social media, and do you have any upcoming appearances that you want to plug?
My next upcoming appearance is going to be the surprise. I'll say that it's in December, somewhere in the Toronto area, and it will be announced after the show takes place, and then that's when you'll see an expansion of Nova. In terms of social media, I try and be available on all of it. So I've got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, although I don't have any TikTok videos available right now. I don't know if I'll get into that, but YouTube.
All under your name, Nova.
Yes, Nova Wrestler is typically the handle.
Excellent. Well, want to thank you very much for taking the time out today to come on the Great North Wrestling Podcast. Do you have any final words for your growing fan base, because you are most definitely blowing up in terms of fan recognition and appreciation?
Thank you. I would just say, for all the fans out there and everybody watching, do not let the size of your town dictate the size of your dreams. Truly.
That's inspiring stuff. Well, again, Nova, thank you very much for appearing on the Great North Wrestling Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
And next week, fans, we have an appearance by my friend, ECW original, the Kingpin, Angel Medina. So don't miss that. Until then, take care, folks.